Today is an interesting topic. It's personality disorders and non-duality. Yeah. So as a disclaimer, I'm always giving disclaimers. I am not an expert in personality disorders. I don't claim to be. I have just studied it because I find it interesting, and any information I give could be incorrect. Like, I'm not sure about my mind and my memory of things. Yeah. So first of all, before we start with comparing personalities or talking about personalities with disorders with non-duality, first of all, going to speak about what non-duality is. Maybe some people don't know what personality disorders are, so I'll go into that as well. And I'll go into why I decided to pick this topic today. So what is non-duality? The best subject in the whole entire world, I think. So to me, non-duality is an energetic movement from being separate to non-separation. It's not the fixing of the personality, it's not a behavior, it's not a human way of being. It's going back to something that's non-conceptual and experiential, beyond words and beyond behaviors, beyond thoughts. It's a movement back to what I would call your essence. And it is a movement. So when you're identified with the person, there is this like energetic thing that happens that makes you feel small. And as that begins to break away, and when you have awakenings, and then there is this like shift where your essence feels like fundamentally who you are, and the character is something appearing in you. So I would call it like an energetic expansion. So from being contracted to an energetic expansion, and it's like love. Not conditional love, but unconditioned love, or you could call it deep rest. But it's not a personality thing, and that's the most confusing thing to someone, because when you're listening with thoughts and when you're listening with mind, and that's how we often listen, then you take what I say or anyone says, and then you interpret it through the mind. And if you interpret it through the mind is in dualistic thinking, so subject-object, so it always relates to you, obviously, because that's the nature of the way we think. So say if I taught you how to clean a carpet, like the way in which I communicate it to you is there is an I there, a you there, which uses a machine to clean a carpet. So I'm identifying all these objects, a you that is standing there with a vacuum, this big vacuum that like sucks in water and it does this whole cleaning carpet thing, it does this wheel. Then there's a vacuum, then there's a carpet, and then there's all the space around, and then there is me that's instructing you. So there is all these separate objects in our language. When we identify with being an object, which is ourself, the body, mind, the thoughts, the feelings, the ideas, we then separate from all other things, and it becomes an energetical expression in the body. That sounds really weird, but there is this feeling of you being inside the body, like your body is limited. It's like your thoughts create this idea that you've begun to believe without a doubt, that you are someone inside the body. And then when that happens, there is a losing of your sense of peace, like not yours personally, but this sense of peace, of being, of life, of everything. And when that sense of beingness is lost, then something forms where the personality structure begins to seek for relief in pleasure and pain. And that's one of the biggest mistakes of humanity. And this isn't something that I am saying just as me. God, that could be taken on so many different levels. Like it's being just spoken, really. On the ultimate level, it's just speaking coming out. But as Lisa, it's not just me, like there's many spiritual traditions that also talk about this dilemma of craving, they call it in Buddhism, or seeking, more so in non-duality. So trying to hold on to pleasure and avoid pain. So as soon as you become this body, then you focus on the main thing of the body, which is the pleasure-pain movement. And that's the way our bodies are programmed to move around what's pleasurable and painful. And then it gets so much more complicated with our psychology, with our understanding, with our social interactions. But it's kind of like the primary principle, I think, of most mammals, maybe all mammals, this movement between pleasure and pain. But this cutting off from the wholeness creates seeking, which is this misidentification that peace will come in pleasure. So my dog Khaleesi, she certainly moves towards pleasure and away from pain. That's her primary setup. And it sometimes can be complex even for a dog, the way she associates things as pain and pleasure. So she primarily does that, but she doesn't have a disconnect from peace. So in the background there's always peace. So like today, she got very agitated by a dog. Normally I'm always in control of it, but the dog came up to us and we were in a very narrow path and we ended up falling over, rolling around in the mud. And there's the couple whose other dog it was felt really bad that they'd let their dog do that. But to her, that is pain in the moment. That's also trauma arising. That's also personality disturbance. Like it comes because in the beginning, I didn't really understand what it was to have a wild street dog. And so I didn't train her in the right way. I trained her more in the way of a traditional domesticated dog. I didn't really understand her genetic conditioning. And then there's also trauma from being a street dog. So there becomes this personality disturbance where she struggles with some dogs if they bother her. You know, like she can walk past them, but if they bother her, she struggles. So you could call this a personality disturbance, but she has no attachment to that. So afterwards, it's like the body shakes and she kind of releases that trauma. It's not necessarily about releasing the trauma, but she doesn't identify, you could say, with that trauma. It's not belonging to her. So there is the pain of it, there is the overreaction that comes from her, but she doesn't feel that she's lost wholeness from it, because on the underlying level, she is always everything. She's not a singular dog in relation to all these objects. She doesn't know that she's got a nose and ears. Her body doesn't walk into things, so the body has the intelligence of being separate, but internally she feels one with everything. I know that's a big statement for me to say, but I just know that she can't separate. She hasn't got complex thinking which does that. So there is an underlying deep sense of peace there. So therefore, when she has these pains, which I'm sure are very painful, and these traumas which can carry on, like my mum's dog, you know, can have elongated periods of trauma after fireworks or something. He's a rescue dog as well. But there isn't a personality that's owning that, that's making it about them. And there isn't this sense that that trauma is going to take away wholeness, or that if they get to pleasure, they will get to wholeness, because they feel that in the background, or they feel that in the foreground, they feel that everywhere. So there is a huge difference there, even though they can have personality disturbances. And this is, so what's happened in the human, it's very complex, because we have this complex thinking which is way beyond comprehension, actually. And we have these traumas, and we have this ability for our mind to get stuck on traumas, but that doesn't necessarily mean seeking. Seeking is this sense of your internal being, that which never leaves, feeling separated. So since you were born at birth, you always had this consciousness and this I am. Teachers call that all different words, call it love. There was always this immediate sense of being that wasn't based on your personality structure, your behaviors, your body. It was this sense of being that wasn't separate from everything. So the baby looks out at the world and it has no sense, oh, I'm these hands or I'm this body. It just is this pure beingness that's everywhere. It doesn't know that it's a baby in the body, separate from the wall, the ceiling, the mother. It just is. And this is a very deeply contented beingness. It's total at-homeness. Even though the body's experiencing pleasure and pain, underneath that it's totally connected to that peace. And then that begins to change as its brain begins to develop its functioning. But we forget that beingness. That beingness becomes one and the same thing as the personality and the body. So you can't separate that beingness out. It feels like that beingness is limited and inside this body. So there is this beingness, this empty looking, you could call it, or consciousness, and there is this sense of I am, which is timeless and without feeling, without emotion, without anything. And it is the core sense of being, and you could call it love. And it's timeless. And it is everywhere in all things. Some people call it God, mystery, no-thing and everythingness. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And that's here right now. And that is everything's birthright. But that kind of seemingly becomes condensed into the personality. So the personality thinks, I am conscious, I am this body. And it can't separate out the consciousness and the I am from things, from personality, from feelings, from emotions, from thoughts, from behaviors, from others. It feels like you are that. And then that loses that connectedness to wholeness. Yeah, it's beautiful. Non-duality is so beautiful. Yeah, so to carry on with that. So when we get into this subject, the personality is normally unbalanced for various different reasons. It can be because of insecure relationships while being brought up. So insecure and unbalanced relationships. So your caregivers didn't demonstrate to you safety on an emotional level, physical level, or like food and stuff. Is that physical? It comes under physical. So this can disturb the personality. So they didn't meet your needs of attachment. Then the other issues that can arise is trauma. So having grounded parents and secure parents or caregivers, but then immense trauma like war, death, all types of problems, car accidents. This can disturb the personality. And then the other is the seeking, which believes that the sense of being, your essence, is found in pleasure and avoiding pain. So pleasure can be relationships, objects, money, house, story about yourself, the way others see you, food, alcohol, drink, it can be all these things and more. and avoiding pain at all cost. And this exaggerates and exacerbates the already unbalanced personality. And I would go to suggest that most personalities aren't that balanced in our society. We do get balanced personalities, but I would suggest that most aren't so balanced, and it's getting worse. The caregiving standards, I know it sounds terrible, like doom and gloom, but I think the caregiving standards of children is becoming worse. So the way in which we raise children, so that seems unbelievable to us, because if you think back to like 50, 60, 70 years ago, you know, there was so many dogmatic and strict and ridiculous ideas. But I think it's becoming worse, because I think that a lot of the time, particularly in Western society, parents don't have enough time to create really secure attachments with the children. So the most important thing, I don't know actually most important, but more than likely one of the most important things is secure attachment in childhood, not your beliefs. So even though there could be these really religious, dogmatic beliefs like 50, 60, 70 years ago that we all think are like boop boop now, or 100 years ago, they maybe had more secure attachment with their primary caregivers, maybe even before the education system came in, but that could be wrong, and it's dependent totally. And that's just my opinion, I don't really know. I also think social media and computers play a part in it as well, and that we're becoming more nuclear in our families, so we're becoming more confined, and we're heading more towards a more individualistic society rather than a community society. Yeah. So the problem that we get into when we express non-duality, and I'm only just really beginning to understand the depth of this, is that a lot of people come into non-duality with already disbalanced personalities. In the East, they would spend many, many years balancing the personality before they came into non-duality, and I understand why that is now. Not that the East is all correct, because I don't think they have great psychological understanding of things, and they have this whole guru thing, so they've got issues in themselves. But yeah, I do think that non-duality can, to an extent, heal issues in personalities, but I think also it can exacerbate it, especially if you like really listen to really extreme, like neo non-duality, which I love, and I love to speak like neo non-duality, neo Advaita. I can't remember what it's called. I love to speak that. I love listening to it. But if you think about some of the things that are said, if you've got an extreme personality disorder, so personality disorder is something that is developed particularly in psychology, and they have different personalities and different criteria that people have to meet in the DSM. And I think that most people are on spectrums of personality disorders, but they wouldn't get diagnosed with it, but there's like a spectrum, there's like an element towards certain disorders. So you have different personality disorders, and then you have something like everything is empty. If you looked at something like BPD, borderline personality disorder, or narcissistic personality disorder, one core criteria is that they feel emptiness, but not in a positive way, it's in a very negative way. And they feel this chronic emptiness because in childhood, again, this is just my opinion, and I might be wrong about this, but in childhood they haven't had their personality reflected back to them enough, their wants, their needs, maybe not had it at all, and they struggle to develop a healthy ego or a healthy personality, which has wants, which has needs, which can define itself from other people. And then if you go into non-duality, it's about breaking down the ego. And if you've already got this emptiness and no ego, and then you're breaking down the ego, and then you're hearing teachers say the emptiness part is positive, and they can totally relate to that. They totally don't know who they are or what they want or what they feel, but it's not the same thing. But to them, another thing that maybe BPT or MPD have is that they feel low self-esteem. So they listen to this subject and then they're like, oh yeah, I experience this emptiness, I'm really close to enlightenment. And they think it's the same thing. I mean, in a way there is a quality, because the personality isn't true, so they can see that. But if you haven't got an established ego, you just can't really survive very well in this world. You're just going to create hell for yourself, not in a positive way. And you'll most probably use non-duality in a negative way as well, because it's kind of the tendency of that personality disorder, unless it's treated or known or understood and conceptualized. So this is just one example of the difficulties with non-duality and personality disorder. And I'm only really beginning to conceptualize it. When I got into non-duality, I didn't know about I did know a little bit about personality disorders back then, but I didn't know so much, and I just totally fell in love with this subject. I just fell in love with, every time someone mentioned the now, my heart would sing, and I didn't really understand conceptually everything, but it was like I felt love. I felt like I knew it on the tip of my tongue. And what I experienced when I began to teach was a lot of hatred from people in non-duality, a lot of love as well, but some hatred that I was far out. How can they be into non-duality and have so much hatred for me? Fair enough, they think I'm a bad teacher, or they think that I am misleading people. That's fair enough. But the rage and the hatred, so if somebody sent a balanced comment, they're not raging and hating on me, and they're saying, giving lists of reasons of why I'm a bad teacher, I feel that's fair enough, that's their opinion. And I can always see how anybody that teaches has negativity to it, because you can't teach everybody at once. And there's always going to be problems in every system. And I can recognize problems in my personality when teaching happens, but I don't think that means that I'm a bad teacher. I think I've got great qualities as well, but I can recognize that and I can reflect on it, and I'm so happy to expand and try to improve in those areas. But I'm always going to be imperfectly perfect, like everybody. And we're always like a work in process that's evolving. But this rage and this hatred and this projection, this putting up, bringing down, putting up, bringing down, extreme, fascinated me. It also scared me as well. Prior to becoming a teacher, I felt like non-duality was like love and ultimate compassion. Yeah, I just thought it was so beautiful, and I thought it was also ultimate world peace in a way, the biggest activism you could do. Then when I started teaching it, I saw this other side to non-duality, that this extreme level of hate that can be there. Sometimes I also recognize that people can be doing it as a practice. I also love Osho, and I know that Osho has this thing of really expressing and letting out your anger. So I'm also open to the idea that sometimes it's a conscious practice to be abusive towards me. In Osho, it's you'd go into these classes and you'd just shout and scream every abuse you wanted to everybody in the room or to anybody. But I don't think I think occasionally it was that, but I think most of the time, the people that really hated on me really believed it. And I see it with other teachers as well. Like, I see the hateful comments. It's not just me. You know, that's why a lot of teachers have ban on comments. And I think that the people are also that are doing it are into non-duality. It's not like they stumbled on this channel and then started hating on it. That I can understand more. I think they're deeply into non-duality from their comments. Yeah. And so for years, you know, I've really like pondered this. And I think now I really begin to understand it, because I think that personality disorders are on the increase because we're having less secure human attachment. We're going through this massive evolutionary change. You know, both parents now are normally working in the West. I'm not saying that mothers should stay at home or anything. Like, I'm not saying that if you want to work, great, that's good. But statistically, it has been shown, and again, statistics can be wrong because who is the person that wants these statistics and what is their motivation? But from lots of studies, it has been shown that the very secure early attachments, which most probably mean a parent not going off and going to work and leaving the child in childcare, is healthier for the child. Or if you do leave them, it's like leaving them with people that they already have very strong relationships with. Although that could be wrong. Yeah. So it's on the increase. And then I think that things that non-duality say, you know, the emptiness, the ego, like there is no ego, there is no person, which is so totally true, resonate when there's personality disorders or very extreme personalities, or even like just on a tendency of that personality disorder. Then I also think the other element of it, which also goes in with personality disorders, is this idea of becoming supremely enlightened, like God, like Jesus, like the Buddha, like this supremely perfect person. And yeah, that really goes, you know, with narcissistic personality disorder. Like, who wants to go to a therapist, you know, when you can do something which makes you enlightened and tells you that there's nothing wrong with you? And people with personality disorders find it very difficult going to therapists because of the level of shame that they feel. It's yeah, and working one-on-one with people. Whereas non-duality is this group thing where it kind of like suggests that it heals all problems, which in one way it does. It's like absolute freedom. But I feel if you're like strongly identified and suffering from a personality disorder, it's highly unlikely that this is going to be heard. I feel like it's most probably going to be used as a way to cope with the personality disorder and to feel better about yourself, to keep other people at bay, and to deal with that. Could even support and exaggerate personality disorders. So I see the problem. I can see why therapists would be absolutely repulsed by the idea of non-duality, you know, knowing it very thickly, not knowing it intimately. I can see why they would think it was dangerous, but they don't know it intimately. Like, if you know it intimately, like really, really comprehend non-duality, it's the most beautiful thing there is. It really is. And I feel like non-duality saved my life. I don't feel like I had a personality disorder. I feel like I'm on the spectrum like other people, but I do feel like I had severe trauma and was acting out severe trauma. Like, or maybe not severe, like I wasn't in a war zone or anything. Maybe that's worse. Like, but I had high trauma. So by the time I left home, I was exhibiting effects of high trauma. And I feel like meditation, non-duality saved my life, and I feel like the therapy, I did lots of therapy, helped balance me. And also the meditation, the groups, and all the group work I did, and Osho helped balance my personality as well. But I feel like if I just did therapy without non-duality, like, I would think that I would have I feel like I would have mastered how to deal with the trauma and my personality issues. So I would have mastered that and become more balanced in that level, but there would have still been this loss that every human experiences, which is the most profound suffering, the loss from self. I feel like in combination, these two are so powerful. You just go into therapy and it's too mindy, it's too much on the personality, but you just go into non-duality and you've got to settle the personality down first. Otherwise it's just going to be about, non-duality is going to become a coping mechanism. So this combination is like it rocks. And I feel like it's an evolution from what came out of the East. I feel like in the East, they haven't really got the psychology, and there's lots of this guru thing going on, which can have benefits to it, but I feel like in the East they're not very psychologically aware. And if you take India for an example, and if you look at society that reflects back the psychology of people, India can be a very cruel society. I'm sorry, India. I'm not saying that we as Westerners aren't cruel as well, but I do feel like we're improving. Like the way in India poverty is treated, and like the big gap between richness and poverty. I'm not saying that the West hasn't played a part. I know that England did terrible things to India and stolen, and in a way, maybe the fact that Europe became so rich, it gave it opportunity for society to become a bit more fair. They are getting more fair and better, I think. There's also problems in our society, but we do have a healthcare system we do attempt to have a healthcare system for everyone and social benefits, and that is a huge thing. Like, I know it's still so lower than what we could be, but it's a huge thing if you look at society. I don't really know the ins and outs of India, but I don't know what they do for somebody that doesn't have healthcare in India, like private healthcare. I think there are some government hospitals, but I think it's not so good. I mean, except America. America's the big exception. Why, Americans? I don't understand. Do you not have more social help for people? That to me just seems insane. You're so rich. Yeah, so that is my talk on personality disorders and non-duality. Yeah. And you're welcome to ask questions. I've begun to change in the last year, I think. I'm less willing to go into personal stuff on these sessions because I don't know how beneficial that is for people. I begin more and more, I begin to understand psychology, the more I think it's better really if you work with someone one-to-one on your psychology. I'm happy to give hints, but I feel like there is so many possibilities of what could be going on for you, you know. It's only a guess and a recommendation and an exploration, but I just realized there could be so many different variants in there. And it's very hard to just have someone call in and just give a few things. I can point to things and talk about the chakras and talk about things generally, but it's firstly not my expertise. I have trained myself so much in it, but I'm not like an expert in human behavior and human feelings and energies in the body. But I am, I feel, an expert on non-duality. And that's where my expertise are. It's like without a doubt, I know what non-duality is beyond the person. Like it's like I feel so I kind of gone back to more pointing about that, but then it's like I have to be careful because I also don't want to go too extreme into non-duality. It's like a delicate balancing. Yeah. So you're welcome to write questions on Skype, or I can call you, but don't call me. Always just call me and nothing else after it so I can see it in Skype, but don't call me because I'm trying to not let it make any sounds for people, because people have requested and said that's uncomfortable, that Skype sound. So yeah, please put, and then also I'm not in the same time as you, I'm a few seconds ahead, so I might still be speaking to someone else when you call in. Am I ahead? Yes, I'm ahead. I'm not behind. And we can get very existential about that. Yeah.